I recently reviewed the first Call of Duty game and decided not to include United Offensive in that review. My reasoning for that was that I had never played United Offensive before, and on Steam the game was separate from the actual Call of Duty 1 game, so I thought it was like a standalone expansion kind of deal. However, after playing it, I realized that I was wrong. I should have included it in my review of the first game. Oh well. I won't be doing my usual format for this video because, yeah, it's an expansion, so most of what's here is exactly the same as the main game, so I'll mostly talk about what's new here. Just like the main game, I had to change my resolution in the game files to get it to run at 1440p. However, I had another little quirk that needed ironing out. Whenever I aimed down sights, it wasn't a fluid movement, it was jerky and bumpy, which I've never seen before in a shooter. I also had to go into the config file to get that to work properly. I'll leave the links to the instructions on how to fix these issues in the description in case you run into these problems. The game obviously looks the same on a technical level as the main game, but there are quite a few new locations and scenarios that we get to experience. We don't play as the same soldiers we did in the main game for each campaign, of which we get an American, British, and Russian campaign again in that order. We start off with the Americans in a snowy forest battling the Germans. The art direction in the expansion is really nice. The snowy forest is oddly pretty, and some of the other settings like the Italian coast in the British campaign are kind of picturesque, minus the shooting and Nazis. My favorite campaign in the expansion is the British one, which begins in a very cool and tense gunner section in a plane which kind of feels like the precursor to World at War's aerial mission. The game introduces weapon mounting for the first time in the series, as well as sprinting. Sprinting kind of feels like it was added as a way to combat some of the frustration in the design of the levels and health system, and it did help a little bit. There are also a handful of new guns like the Guer and SVT-40. I had mentioned in my review of the main game how the combination of hit-scan enemy weapons with no regenerating health for the player was a bad design decision, and United Offensive makes you feel the weight of that unfortunate design even more than the main campaign. There were quite a few times where I would just have to resort to trial and error to get past certain sections of the game because I didn't have any way to heal myself and no way of avoiding damage. It was quite frustrating. The checkpoint system also seems to be screwed up. There were multiple times when I would play through a level, not hit any checkpoints, die and get sent back to a lot earlier in the mission, and then upon replaying parts of the missions I had done before, I would get a checkpoint even though I didn't get one the first time I had played through that part. At least the game still allows you to manually save, however, even that has its issues, because about a third of the time when I would save manually, the game would crash, and I had to relaunch the game. Curiously, the save that I had made was actually still there, so I didn't lose any progress, but it's still a bizarre issue. The technical problems don't stop there, unfortunately. I had instances of shadows flickering in and out, which wasn't a huge deal, and whenever I'd exit and enter a building, the music that was playing would very obviously stop abruptly and begin playing again from the start of the track. Again, not a huge deal. What is a much more annoying problem were the frame rate hitches. This happened in the main game as well, but not nearly as often as it did in the expansion. The game was running at a smooth 60 frames per second, but every 2 to 3 minutes the game would just pause for a split second, and this happened throughout the entire expansion. I don't know if it's because of compatibility issues with my hardware or a result of messing with the config files or something else, but this was by far the most annoying technical issue I had to deal with. But despite all that, I enjoyed United Offensive even with its technical issues and design flaws. The campaign was quite fun with some missions that surpassed the main game's offering. I would definitely recommend you play it if you enjoyed the first game, and hopefully you don't run into the same technical problems that I had. I'm going to give Call of Duty United Offensive a 7 out of 10.